Minister, while the provisions of this bill are to be welcomed, I do have concerns over the exclusion of a number of elements of the recommendations of the Finance Committee, and especially the retrospective element of the Finance Committee. In that committee, we sat week after week and we listened to a string of whistleblowers testify before us, and we listened strongly to what they have said. Some of them have had their lives ruined with regards to their experiences, and I've spoken to many whistleblowers who have lost marriages, families, jobs, pensions and homes. Being a whistleblower in this state is a job of enormous personal cost in many situations. And I struggle to think of a particular case where it didn't involve some significant personal cost to an individual. A few of them obviously were former public servants. I believe that where whistleblowers suffer a loss to themselves, they deserve compensation for that loss. But the wording of this bill, has omitted to make elements of it retrospective. And I believe as well that there's a tendency by this government, when it comes to EU directives or EU legislation, to be very slow to amend it or to change it. But the amendments that are the recommendations of the Finance Committee are actually seek to strengthen that bill. So surely as an independent country, we're not locked into delivering only what Europe tells us to do. Surely we can strengthen any directive to make it obviously better. And the recommendations from the Finance Committee don't seek to water it down or to weaken it, but sure seek to enhance the bill, and that includes the retrospective element. I've dealt with many whistleblowers over the years who have sacrificed much to expose wrongdoing. And I have to say that the state's attitude towards whistleblowers leaves an enormous amount to be desired. In many cases, whistleblowers have had mud slung on them by the state, and in many cases that mud has stuck, and the reputations of whistleblowers have been damaged, I believe, even by governments in the past as well. And I've heard ministers in this government outright contradict facts that have been brought to them. So it's very common for a state agency to call a whistleblower a liar, or to imply that they're mad, or worse still, in a famous case, to make accusations of child sexual abuse against a whistleblower. And in the case of the cervical check, we know that the state tried to gag Vicky Phelan with regards to a non-disclosure agreement. And a recent case that I raised about Mrs. Orr, who received an apology, thankfully, from TUSLA after having a number of inaccurate statements made about her on her file. TUSLA's file said, amongst other things, that she was an alcoholic, and that TUSLA had met with her son, and that her son had expressed that he did not wish to return to his mother. But Mrs. Orr rigorously fought for the rights of her son and her good name. She fought like any mother would fight. And TUSLA have conceded now that Miss Orr was not an alcoholic, and that the alleged meeting between her son and TUSLA never actually took place whatsoever. It's phenomenal stuff that happened, and TUSLA have apologised to her. But I asked the Minister for Children in here when he first became aware of these untruths on the TUSLA file, and he said he only became aware of the issues when a politician contacted him on the 16th of March 2021. However, Miss Orr has shown my office emails that she sent to the Minister 5 months prior to that date, and when I raised that discrepancy with the Minister in the Dáil having the documents to hand, he still denied that he knew about it at the time. In effect, the Minister was calling Miss Orr a liar, even in the face of documentary evidence. So over a year ago now, I took a meeting with Cervical Check to discuss the various concerns I had about that particular scandal. And at the meeting, the clinical director of Cervical Check told me in no uncertain terms that it was her view that the courts were wrong to rule in favour of women such as Vicky Phelan, the late Patricia Carrick, Ruth Morrissey and Emma Vick Vahuna. Cervical Check told me that these women were not wronged. An incredible situation. When I told the Taoiseach and the Minister for Health about these comments, the Minister said that this wasn't the case. And again, in effect, the government were calling me a liar in relation to a meeting that I was involved in, where I took notes and where my parliamentary assistant was also there. On another occasion, I tried to raise in this House concerning the COVID-19 outbreak in a nursing home in Galway, where a nursing home had asked the HSE for staffing support, but had been left abandoned. The Minister responded to me, and I quote, "That's a flat-out lie," he said. Now, my source of information was a distraught manager in the nursing home, a report in RTE's today with Claire Byrne, and the local GP, Dr. Martin Daly, who was, of course, the former president of the IMO. A month later, I secured documents under FOI from the HSE, which confirmed not only the veracity of the story, but also that the Health Minister had been briefed about the situation by the HSE prior to him levelling an accusation against me for lying in the Dáil about it, or for the report on the Claire Byrne show, or the nursing home manager, or Dr. Daly reporting on it as well. So we've lots of discussions as well in recent weeks about the Brandon report and the disability services, and it was brought to light by Deputy Pringle and a whistleblower who was in touch with him. And the manner in which the state treated not only the whistleblower but also Deputy Pringle himself, I believe, is shameful. And one of the contributions is a mirror image to the issue that I've just raised with regard to TUSLA files. A dispute arose over the content of documentation that Deputy Pringle had furnished the review panel with. In effect, Deputy Pringle was made look like a liar. We all recall the powerful contribution of Deputy John McGuinness on the Grace case, and indeed he is to be commended for the work that he did in that issue. It is my understanding, and it has been reported, that behind the scenes the Taoiseach has criticised the Deputy for his contribution on that. If the states, if civil servants, if the government ministers can smear opposition deputies or indeed backbenchers like this, God knows what else is happening to whistleblowers behind the scenes. This legislation is welcome, but there is a need for a change of culture in this state. The trouble is, nearly every organisation, be it a political organisation, a state organisation, or a civil society organisation, seems to have an instinct that its job is to protect itself against those who are simply seeking to out grave wrongs. Now, I can understand why an organisation would want to protect itself against vexatious allegations, etc. But when an individual seeks to highlight and out grave wrongs, the culture of that organisation should not be defensive. The culture of that organisation should actually seek to empower that individual to help reform that organisation. And I know for a fact that even political parties in this chamber strongly have that instinct of defence against the greater good. And that culture has to change. And it has to change from within here. I have spent 10 years in Leinster House, and I've heard people from all sides of the Dáil calling for reform. Some of the simplest reform that can be achieved in Leinster House is from the political class themselves. And there's no evidence in this government, since it's taken office in 2020, that there is a political desire for reform of itself. The legislation is welcome, but is wholly useless unless government ministers adopt a policy of legislating and listening to whistleblowers, and to desist from pushing back against them. The culture of organisations has to change, including in this House as well. And I think there will be many TDs and ministers actually will vote for this legislation tonight, who have previously been involved in pushing back against whistleblowers in their attempt to protect their reputation. Such hypocrisy has to be called out. We need systemic change, not just in this legislation, but also in how this government operates.